All right, guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about the 4 factors that play a role in someone developing a cannabis substance use disorder or a weed addiction. And it's really important that you understand each of these 4 factors and the role that they play, because if you're struggling with addiction to cannabis and you want to overcome it, you have to start by understanding how you got in the current situation that you're in. And listen, I can promise you this is going to be radically different than other information that you typically hear out there when it comes to substance use and addiction problems. We're not going to be talking about trauma and your environment and your genetics and all that stuff. That I can promise you. And listen, if you start to understand this stuff correctly, just like our client did here who's been working with us, you can dramatically change your career, right? This guy drove $31,000 in more revenue for his business since quitting. Or like this individual here who's up for a series of new job interviews since she recently quit just a week or 2 ago with us. This stuff can dramatically change when you stop your relationships, your physical health, your mental health, your financial well-being. These are wins that we see people accomplish all the time after overcoming cannabis addiction. Now, real quick, if you're new here, my name's Dr. Frank, and we have a science-backed method that has a 98% client success rate at helping people quit nicotine, cannabis, and other substances in as little as 48 hours. We do this privately without disrupting your public life and image, and we can do it without relapse. This method is designed specifically for high-level professionals and high-performance individuals. I put a link in the video description and the pinned comment if you want to learn more. The first cause of cannabis substance use is going to be that it's a learned habit. Okay, it's not a disease, it's not that you're broken, it's not that you're powerless. It's a habit loop that you've taught yourself over the years, right? It's an ingrained behavior. I'll give you an example of this. So let's say you have a very stressful day at work, at the office. You come home and you consume cannabis in the evenings. When you consume cannabis, you get that endocannabinoid production, you get that release of dopamine, maybe a little bit of serotonin, and then you suddenly feel relief. And you associate that feeling of relief with a reward. So now we're creating that association, that learned behavior in our brain that cannabis is rewarding. So your cue was the stress that you experienced at work. This is how a habit loop works. You have a cue, a routine, and a reward. Your cue was the work stress. Your routine was coming home and consuming cannabis. And now your reward is this false sense of calm that you're feeling. And I really want to emphasize the word false because it truly is a false sense of calm. And we'll explain why when I talk about reason number 2, why that is. Now, I also see this a lot when it comes not to a stressful day, but to a big win. We work with, like that gentleman I showed you there, he's a trial attorney. We work with a lot of physicians, a lot of business owners, right? People in high pressure sales. They'll get realtors, they'll get these big wins day to day during their job. So they get a big win, then that's the cue, a big win. Their routine is going home to celebrate, right? To celebrate with cannabis. And then again, the reward is that feeling of calm, that feeling of celebration that they get from it. So this is how we create habit loops. We see it with people with nicotine, right? I wake up, my cue in that case was just waking up and being alive. Now my routine is going to be to consume nicotine while driving in my car. And the reward is this feeling of enhanced focus while I'm driving to work. You can unlearn learned behaviors. You have the ability to do that. You're constantly learning and unlearning behaviors, especially unlearning behaviors that no longer serve you anymore. At one point in your life, you really enjoyed riding your bike around, and then you learned how to drive a car. And driving a car during the middle of winter when it's pouring rain outside became preferable. You unlearned, you still know how to ride a bike, but you developed a preference for driving your car. People do this all the time. Some behaviors that I recommend rewiring these habit loops to people are exercise, things that get you in a state of creative development or creative activity, things that can create a flow state. For me, that's editing and writing YouTube videos and stuff like that. It could be socializing with other individuals, or it could be learning a new skill set. I'm constantly learning about YouTube, and I'm constantly learning about, addiction recovery stuff, new information, new science that's coming out, and I can apply that to a creative activity like editing a YouTube video for you guys to help out. These are activities that I recommend rewiring in to your habit loops. All right, now it can be simpler than that. I'll give you an example from my real day life. I work, all day long, 7 a.m., 5 till 5 p.m. 5 p.m. hits, and I was used to consuming cannabis, smoking weed, using nicotine. But now instead what I do, so here's my cue, the workday ends, I close my computer. My routine used to be using drugs. Now my routine is drinking a seltzer water or a hot water with lemon, eating a Honeycrisp apple, and that now tells my brain, okay, Frank, workday's over, it's time to calm down. It sounds stupid simple, and in many cases, it actually is. Now you might say, well, what's your reward? My reward from that is completing a day of work and still feeling good enough to go spend time with my wife and my child and have fun chasing him around the house. My reward in that instance is getting to be present for my family. Now that's my reward, might not apply to you. Beliefs. This is probably the most important one, and this is probably the one that keeps people most addicted. Beliefs are extremely powerful. They're powerful enough to cause wars. That drug that you're consuming, cannabis, weed, whatever it is, it doesn't have any inherent control over you. It has no power over you. You could crumble up a nugget of weed, you could take a vape cartridge and you could throw it in the trash like you may have done thousands of times before like I did. You could take that alcohol, you could open it up and dump it down the drain. It has no ability to manipulate you or control you. So what makes that drug so powerful? Your belief system surrounding the perception of benefit that you get from that drug consumption, that's what makes it powerful. Now, how's this work? You take a drug, the drug, cannabis, creates a physical change within your body. You get a sensation change. You feel different. You feel a high. Now, you've associated that high with a belief or a superpower, right? Something that the drug isn't capable of having. So I work really hard at work. I'm stressed. I come home and my routine is to consume cannabis. I consume cannabis during a period of high stress. My body feels differently. I feel high. And I've now associated that physical state of change with stress relief. I've now developed a belief system that cannabis has the superpower to alleviate stress. Maybe it could be alcohol for a social situation, whatever it is. Beliefs are insanely powerful. And 9 times out of 10, this is what's keeping a person stuck in active addiction. It sounds easy, but it's a little complicated because when you're under the active use of drug consumption, you're living in like kind of this delusion. Things are foggy. And this is really a big thing that we help people break down. Typical limiting beliefs, and they're limiting stories that people tell themselves, is cannabis helps with stress, it helps me relax, it helps with the boredom, it eases the loneliness, it helps with the anxiety, it helps with the pain, right? It helps with my physical pain, despite the fact that we're usually able to show the person that they're creating significantly more pain on the back end consequences of their continued substance use, right? So your belief system is what's going to be extremely powerful. And again, guys, look, you change these things, you can quit in as little as 48 hours if you do it correctly. And if that appeals to you and you're a high-level professional, maybe you're a realtor, a physician, an attorney, an entrepreneur, you're a public figure in your local community and you need privacy, you don't want to go to group meetings, you don't want to do any of that. We have a science-backed method that has a 98% client success rate at helping people quit. And I put a link for that in the pinned comment in the video description. Now, this one is also super important when it comes to cannabis substance use and how it develops. And this is the dependency that can develop from consuming cannabis within your endocannabinoid system. So in your body has a system called your endocannabinoid system. This system makes its own THC and CBD. It's called something different when your body makes it internally. It's called like 2-AG and ANA or AGA, I forget this abbreviation. But it's your body making its own THC, which is referred to as the bliss molecule. When people go for a run and they get a runner's high, what that is, that high, it's not dopamine and serotonin. It's now been shown that it has to do more with that's your body producing its own endocannabinoids, okay? Now, if you've been consuming cannabis for a long period of time, then your body is eventually going to stop making its own endocannabinoids. And this is a major problem because your body sees that they're coming from an external plant source. This is a major problem though, because once your body shuts down or mitigates its own production of endocannabinoids, this endocannabinoid system can become extremely dysregulated. And this system plays a role in sleep, it plays a role in digestion, it plays a role in hormonal regulation, bone growth and development, emotional regulation, when it comes to feelings of anger, happiness, sadness. all of these things are touched. Cardiac function, heart function, are touched by your endocannabinoid system. So now what happens is people consume a lot of cannabis. They don't take tolerance breaks. This is really the importance of taking tolerance breaks, to allow your body to continue to produce its own endocannabinoids. But if you don't do that, now your body's dependent on cannabis from a plant, and then when you quit, things are all screwed up because this system is out of whack. And this gets very confusing then, because what happens is the person's experiencing the consequences of withdrawal and detox. They maybe, the first 3 to 5 days can't get through it. They go to consume cannabis again because they're stressed. And what do they do when they're stressed, right? We consume cannabis. It's a learned behavior. And now they feel better because they temporarily halted the withdrawals that they were experiencing. Now that reinforces the belief that cannabis alleviates stress, and we just go round and around and around and around. Now, after you quit, generally speaking, it's usually around the 2 to 4 week mark. We're gonna start to see natural production of the body's own endocannabinoids, but there's supplements, there's medications, there's things that you can do to help get you through this process. If you are someone who's physically dependent, there's lifestyle modification, all that can be assessed when it comes to healing a person's endocannabinoid system, okay? And you can fully recover from it, even in the worst cases, where we see people who have Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome or CHS, all right? We work with a lot of that too. We also have society's point of view that's going to be problematic. So right now in society, weed is in a highlight. It's like alcohol, right? It's getting to a point where people are like shocked if you don't consume weed. Even people who have quit other drugs, right? They got off of heroin, they quit drinking alcohol, all because they believe it was from smoking weed. And what happens is you tell these people like, yeah, I'm struggling with weed. And they're like, what? What do you mean you're quitting weed? Weed saved my life. Weed is the best thing in the world, right? So that reinforces our beliefs that like, hey, weed's good for me, it has all these benefits. That's a problem. And then secondly, we actually have the systemic problems within most recovery models, right? A lot of these are rooted in 12-step programs, which have a 90% failure rate long-term at helping someone quit a substance. But yet this is probably the most popular model that people are going to be exposed to when they go to a rehab or a therapy clinic or something like that for quitting drugs. 90% failure rate. And then what happens is they tell you that you're broken, you're powerless, and you have a lifelong disease. And then they'll tell you too, it's about much more than quitting the drug. They'll say, well, we got to fix your relationships and your finances. We got to do all these things, which is great. And they'll say, this is why you use drugs. And until we get all this better, until we, lock in your recovery and your sobriety, nothing's going to improve. All this does is create a nightmare of a situation for a person. And that's why you see only a 10% success rate quitting this way. We're not broken, we're not powerless, we're not diseased. But if you're told that over and over and over and over again, eventually it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other thing that I'll see too, and you see this a lot in 12-step programs, is people will often embody or take on other people's personal experiences or opinions. And I'll give you guys a really strong example of this. So we work with MDs that we collaborate with to help detox people off of alcohol privately in their homes without going to a rehab, without having to go to a hospital, especially for like public figures and things like that. And one of the funny things was we were using, the MD was using Valium for a series of like 2 or 3 days just to help the person getting off of alcohol in case they had some panic attacks while they were quitting. And the person uses it, no problem, all this stuff, they get off, they detox great in 3 to 4 days and they're doing fine. But the funny thing is afterwards I'm talking to the individual and they're like, oh, that Valium was strong. And I was like, yeah, it's a fast-acting benzo. And they look at me and they go, benzo, isn't that addicting? Aren't I going to be addicted? Why does that happen? No, 1, you're not going to be addicted. 2, you didn't even know that it was a benzo until I just told you. You're taking on society's point of view on something and you're adopting it as your own. And this is why we're seeing worse and worse rates of addiction. The best thing they ever did for cigarette companies and tobacco companies was tell people that nicotine is the most addicting drug in the world, right? And you're starting to see this more and more now when it comes to cannabis. How many Reddit forums, how many of my YouTube videos, I'm guilty of this, can you find that talk about weed and weed addiction and all that stuff? All it does is perpetuate this story that this drug somehow has the ability to control you, when in all actuality, it doesn't. Make sure that you're not taking on someone else's story, someone else's lived experience when it comes to your personal experience with cannabis. You may be watching this and you may be really struggling with cannabis substance use disorder, like many of the people that we work with, okay? You may be watching this, you may not really be struggling, but this video might be making you think that you are, and you might be taking on someone else's experience. Notice, I didn't mention you have to overcome all your trauma and you have to build up this crazy life for yourself, which, as you can see, a lot of clients that we work with often do wind up building really nice things for themselves. But like, you don't have to do any of that. It's misguided information, and that's why we're at today with substance use. So if you enjoyed this, follow me right into the next video where I talk about a client that we helped recently detox off of binge drinking alcohol and how we applied these principles in real life. I'll see you guys there.